In the mid-16th century, the Indian subcontinent was no stranger to conflict. Empires rose and fell with the rhythm of monsoon rains, and kingdoms lived under the constant shadow of ambition, trade, faith, and power. Yet among the countless battles that scarred the land, one stands almost forgotten. A battle that ended an empire, shifted the cultural and political heart of southern India, and sent waves through centuries of history, yet remains little known outside the region. This is the story of the Battle of Talikota, fought in 1565, the battle many historians quietly consider one of the most decisive in South Asian history, a battle you've probably never heard of. Before the armies clashed, the Deccan, the plateau stretching across central and southern India, was a mosaic of kingdoms. At its heart stood the Vijayanagara Empire, a realm of immense wealth, adorned with grand temples, vast markets, and cities shimmering with jewels, silk, and spices. Its capital, Vijayanagara, was described by Portuguese travelers as one of the richest cities in the world, rivaling Lisbon, Cairo, even Constantinople. Its bazaars overflowed with pearls, diamonds, and horses imported from Arabia. Its walls guarded thousands of artisans, traders, musicians, and scholars. And its streets echoed with the confidence of an empire at its cultural peak. But to the north, the political landscape was shifting. A confederation of sultanates, Bijapur, Golconda, Ahmednagar, Bidar, and Berar, small but powerful states forged through Islamic dynasties and Persianate court cultures, watched Vijayanagara with a mixture of rivalry and apprehension. For decades they had fought the southern empire in border skirmishes, raids, and political intrigues. But now, a new calculation was forming. Vijayanagara's influence was spreading too quickly, its diplomacy too sharp, its wealth too irresistible. An alliance among the sultanates, once unthinkable due to their own internal rivalries, began to take shape. At the center of this rising conflict stood one man, Aliya Rama Raya, the de facto ruler of Vijayanagara. A brilliant politician but a polarizing figure, Rama Raya was known for his cunning diplomacy, playing the sultanates against one another, making and breaking alliances with precision. His strategies worked for years, allowing Vijayanagara to maintain dominance over the Deccan. But they also planted seeds of resentment. To the sultans, Rama Raya was no longer a negotiator, he was a threat. By the early 1560s, a rare unity emerged among the northern sultanates. Old feuds were set aside, treaties signed, and a shared purpose crystallized: Vijayanagara must fall. The alliance was uneasy, but powerful. Combined, the sultanates controlled massive cavalry forces, efficient artillery, and battle-hardened infantry trained in Central Asian warfare. Together, they represented an enemy no empire could ignore. Meanwhile, inside Vijayanagara, the mood was festive yet fragile. Despite its prosperity, the empire faced cracks beneath the surface. Factions within the royal court competed for influence. Some resented Rama Raya's growing authority, others questioned the sustainability of constant war and diplomatic manipulation. Yet for most citizens, life continued with the dazzling normalcy of a flourishing capital. Pilgrims traveled to holy sites, merchants traded in vibrant markets, musicians performed in temple courtyards, and poets wrote verses celebrating the empire's grandeur. As the year 1564 approached, caravans whispered of troop movements in the north. Envoys reported unusual cooperation among the sultanates. Border posts cited large cavalry units. And merchants spoke of artillery being hauled across the plains. Rama Raya dismissed these as familiar threats. After all, the sultanates had formed alliances before, only to quarrel and collapse. But this time was different. Something was stirring, a storm gathering beyond the horizon. The battle that would soon erupt, at a small riverbank near the village of Talikota, would not simply change the borders of kingdoms. It would redraw the cultural, political, and even architectural landscape of South India. It would bring down one of the greatest cities ever built on the subcontinent. And yet, astonishingly, it would become a story largely forgotten outside regional history. To understand the weight of this battle, we must step into the tense months before the armies marched, into the palaces where plans were drawn, and into the minds of rulers who believed they could shape destiny. The story begins not on the battlefield, but in the fragile balance of power that held the Deccan together, a balance about to shatter forever. By late 1564, the Sultanate's alliance moved from whispered rumor to undeniable reality. The Deccan Confederacy had mobilized tens of thousands of cavalry, archers mounted on swift horses, elite musketeers trained in Ottoman firing techniques, and, most dangerously, powerful field artillery capable of shattering enemy formations from afar. For the first time in decades, these rival sultanates marched under a unified banner, determined to bring the mighty Vijayanagara Empire to its knees. Rama Raya responded with confidence, even optimism. To him, this was not an existential threat but a welcome opportunity to crush northern resistance once and for all. The Vijayanagara army was massive, one of the largest in Asia, boasting heavily armored infantry, war elephants, superb archers, and an extensive supply network. Rama Raya believed in the extraordinary resilience and discipline of his forces. More importantly, he believed in his own ability to outmaneuver his enemies diplomatically and militarily. By early January 1565, his army began marching north toward the plains of Talikota. Columns of troops stretched for miles. Elephants decorated with gold-plated armor lumbered forward like living fortresses. Soldiers sang war songs, confident in their empire's invincibility. Behind them followed camps, traders, cooks, blacksmiths, and healers, an entire moving city. The sultanates advanced from the opposite direction. Their commanders worked with unusual unity. Their communication lines were smooth, their scouts well coordinated. Their artillery moved slowly but steadily. When both armies finally approached the river Krishna, the stage was set for a confrontation of unimaginable scale. As the sun rose on January 23, 1565, the first day both armies faced each other, the land fell silent. Two massive forces stood separated by a narrow riverbank. Dust swirled in the cool air. Commanders surveyed the terrain. It was flat, open, and unforgiving, perfect for large cavalry maneuvers and artillery, but treacherous for infantry caught in a charge. Rama Raya, riding atop a towering elephant, watched the enemy lines closely. He believed the Sultanate's alliance would fracture under pressure. His plan was bold: strike hard on the right flank, break the weakest link among the Confederacy, and force the coalition to collapse from within. With decades of experience manipulating Deccan politics, Rama Raya still trusted in a familiar pattern, that unity among the sultanates could not last. But this time, he was wrong. The Confederate commanders had anticipated this move. They had intentionally placed what looked like a weaker force on their flank, masking highly disciplined cavalry units behind light infantry. They were ready for Rama Raya's strike. As the first arrows flew and drums thundered across the plain, the greatest battle South India had ever witnessed was about to begin. The Battle of Talikota would unfold with ferocity, deception, bravery, and betrayal, and by the end of it, the world south of the Krishna River would never be the same again. The morning of January 26, 1565 began like any other, but by midday it would become one of the bloodiest hours in Indian history. As the sun climbed higher, the Vijayanagara army advanced with thunderous energy. Their war elephants roared, towering over infantry formations. Archers released volleys that darkened the sky. Drums echoed across the plains, shaking the hearts of soldiers on both sides. Rama Raya led from the front, a rare sight for a ruler of his age. Clad in gleaming armor, riding a massive elephant decorated with royal insignia, he was both a symbol and a commander. As he raised his hand, the first major assault began. Vijayanagara's right wing surged with terrifying force. Tens of thousands of infantry pushed forward behind armored elephants, aiming to overwhelm the Sultanate's flank. For a moment, it worked. The Sultanate's light infantry fell back, appearing disorganized and vulnerable. Vijayanagara troops cheered, believing victory was already taking shape. But what looked like retreat was a deadly trap. Hidden behind the collapsing line, elite cavalry units waited silently. When Vijayanagara infantry pushed deep enough, the cavalry erupted forward at full speed, slicing into the exposed side of the advancing column. The battlefield descended into chaos. Vijayanagara's war elephants struggled to maneuver under this sudden assault. Spears pierced their armor. Arrows rained down at close range. Many elephants panicked, turning back into their own lines, trampling friendly troops. Confusion spread through the ranks. Rama Raya realized something was terribly wrong. His confidence faltered but did not break. He ordered a full countercharge from the center. Thousands of infantry commanders shouted orders, trying to restore order to the broken flank. The sultanates, anticipating this, unleashed their greatest weapon, field artillery. The thunder of cannons shattered the battlefield. Explosions tore through densely packed Vijayanagara formations. Dust clouds rose like choking storms. Soldiers who had never faced such concentrated artillery fire were stunned, terrified, and disoriented. Cavalry units attempted to encircle the attackers while musketeers fired in coordinated volleys. Then came the decisive moment. Two commanders from the Vijayanagara army's left wing, secretly bribed by the sultanates, suddenly withdrew their forces mid-battle. What had been a stalemate turned instantly into a gaping hole. The Confederate army recognized the opening immediately. Cavalry poured in, swallowing the Vijayanagara left flank, collapsing the entire formation. Rama Raya, surrounded and outnumbered, tried to rally his troops. His elephant became a towering target on the battlefield. The Sultanate's elite guards advanced toward him. In the frenzy, Rama Raya was captured. Accounts differ on what happened next. Some say he was executed instantly, others claim he was brought before a commander who ordered his beheading. What is certain is that his death broke the morale of the Vijayanagara army completely. What followed was a massacre. Without central command, Vijayanagara forces scattered. Units fled across the plains in every direction. Cavalry hunted them down, artillery continued to fire, and war elephants rampaged wildly. By afternoon, the battle was over. A once mighty empire had been crushed in a single day. But the true devastation was yet to come. As the sun set behind the dust-choked horizon, the victorious sultanates marched toward the greatest prize in South India, the legendary city of Vijayanagara itself. When news of Rama Raya's death reached the capital, Vijayanagara fell into panic. For decades the empire had appeared invincible, now it faced the unthinkable. The government evacuated the royal family and many officials across the Tungabhadra River to the fortress town of Penyakanda. But the city itself, with its temples, palaces, libraries, and markets, was exposed. The Confederate armies entered Vijayanagara days later. Eyewitness accounts describe what happened next as one of the most catastrophic destructions in Indian urban history. The city was looted for months. Priceless temples were burned. Gold and jewels were stripped from sacred icons. Libraries holding centuries of knowledge were turned to ash. The mighty bazaars that once overflowed with merchants and music were left in ruins. Travelers who visited the site decades later wrote that they saw little more than silent stone skeletons, empty streets, broken archways, shattered towers, and fields of rubble stretching for miles. The once radiant capital of South India became a ghost city overnight. The empire did not disappear immediately, but its heart was gone. Penyakanda became the new capital, later replaced by Chandragiri, but Vijayanagara would never regain its former power. Over the next century, the empire slowly fragmented until it faded into regional memory. The Deccan Sultanates celebrated their victory, but even they could not fully grasp the long-term impact of Talikota. The fall of Vijayanagara reshaped the cultural map of South India. Temple construction slowed dramatically. Artistic traditions shifted, migrating to small courts and distant kingdoms. The political vacuum paved the way for future powers, including the Marathas and later European colonial forces, to rise. And yet, despite its massive consequences, the Battle of Talikota remains strangely obscure in global historical narratives. It is not taught widely outside South Asia. It rarely appears in world history textbooks. Millions live unaware of the battle that shattered a golden city and permanently altered the trajectory of southern India. History remembers empires that rose, but often forgets those that fell with thunder, especially when the ruins are left to the dust. Talikota was more than a conflict, it was a turning point. The end of one world and the beginning of another. A reminder that even the greatest civilizations can vanish in a single day. This was the most important battle you've never heard of.